Welcome back. Today we're going to do a really quick one on Soundstage. And yes, I did watch Timmy's video on Soundstage. Thought it was entertaining and informative, and I have a lot of respect for Timmy. And so this is not a create a drama kind of thing, but this is my interpretation, a simplification of what I look for in IEMs as far as stage. And we'll start there. So what actually is stage kind of in my mind? And I think it's no different than speakers. I think it is the illusion that sound is everywhere but the point of origin. So when done right with speakers, you hear the music and wonder where it's coming from. It's that virtual speaker, the virtual speaker image that you hear in speaker reviews. But typically, if you walk into a room with a nice set of speakers, you hear beautiful music playing, and maybe you see the speakers in front of you, but it never sounds like the sound is actually emanating, or the speakers are the source of the music. The sound is just in the room. It's room filling music. It's all around you. It sounds like a big stage, those kinds of things. That's kind of the virtual speaker. The actual sound image of where everything is coming from is detached from where it is actually coming from, the point of origin. In IEMs, it's really no different. When staging is done properly, you should really forget that you have things in your ears, and you should just hear the music around your head as if you walked into a room with speakers. And sort of simplify it in that way, because that's the way it should sound. And with TWS, it's actually a little easier because you have no wires. There's no real constant reminder that you have things in your ears. But you should have this feeling that there aren't things in your ears, but you hear the music, almost as if you're not really sure where it's coming from, whether it's speakers or whether it's an IEM in your ear. It's no different. You just hear the music around you without being constantly reminded that there's a thing poking your ear canal. So why do we care about soundstage size so much? It shows up in every review. And I would call that projection. And that's the more projection, the farther the sound appears away from the source, which is your ear holes. So when we talked about wide soundstage, that is sound appearing to originate beyond your ears. Soundstage height kind of is above your ears. Those kinds of things. And I always call that projection because IEMs typically either have projection or don't have projection. That's sort of my cutting off point for most IEMs. And we'll kind of talk about the scale in a second, but that's how I talk about it. If you've ever listened to a binaural recording or a Yosi Horikawa fan, I'm not even going to try to say that. You guys know Yosi, Bubbles, his famous test tracks. Amber Rubarth has sessions from 17th Street, another great binaural recording. Chesky has lots of binaural recordings. Those give you a very good sense of how even IEMs can project way beyond your head. But you don't need a binaural recording to appreciate projection, because it will happen with normal tracks as well. Taylor Swift will project, not as far as Yosi Horikawa, but, kind of in that way, you should notice that there is projection, that there is a detachment of where the sound appears to come from versus where it actually is coming from. The point at which all the sound seems projected, this is the illusion that we are looking for. That is good staging. That is when you forget there are things in your ear. Sort of in the same way that headphones, right? People put on headphones and they say, the stage is huge because the sound is originating from beyond my ears. It's sort of, IEMs do things no differently, but I would call it projection, in that the point of origin of a well-staging IEM should actually sound about the same distance as a headphone would. It's beyond your ear. So is there a scale? And I think these are kind of how I think about it in my mind. There's negative projection. These tend to be the sets that I would label as in your head, cluttered, bad stage. I've probably used all three of those in different reviews. It's really not as common as it used to be with less extended budget sets. It used to be a more common thing. And if you ever see me say in your head, and I said in your head a lot in a lot of reviews, that's typically what I mean. There's no projection. It's not even reaching your ears. It's pretty much all centered within your head. Not a good stage at all. So then there's the average intimate, and I use average occasionally. Intimate I probably almost never use, but it shows up in lots and lots of reviews. I do think it is the most common description for most reviews. And my interpretation of that is typically it's still really not projecting beyond your ears, but it's actually projecting to your ears. And that creates a sense of more space. It sounds less cluttered. It probably doesn't have the height, but it has some depth. Some instruments will snap right to your ear as a constant reminder that you have things in your ears, and it really breaks the illusion. That's why most sets tend to kind of say the stage is okay. And if I say the stage is average, it probably means that it is constantly reminding me that it's not staging as well as it could, and there's probably something wrong in the tuning. But a lot of people use average, a lot of people use intimate, and my interpretation of reviewing sets that people have called soundstage, those words, it typically means the stage is kind of barely okay, kind of makes it out to your ears, but it's not really projecting to the point where there's the illusion of a stage. So good stage, projection in width and height. If you really touch your right hand to the right shell, does the sound appear to be to the right of your hand? And you got to really think about that and really try it. And there will be some sets that your brain gets really confused as to whether the sound is to the right of your hand or right on your hand or to the left of your hand. You got to get used to doing cues and thinking about where the location is of certain instruments in certain parts of certain tracks, and that's just one way to do it. On height, you really pay attention to the vocals and look at them. Close your eyes and look at the vocals. Are they up? Are they at your eye level? Are they your forehead level? Are they above your head? You'll kind of get a range of height on lots of different sets and how they tend to handle height. Is the middle of your head fairly clean and open? A nice distribution of sound around, the sides and above. Does sound appear beyond your head? And like I said, as soon as you get to the point where you can start hearing vocals above your head, you're pretty much in the zone for hearing good stage, hearing stage period. And then there's the better stage, and you kind of get everything from good stage, but then you add a lot of depth and immersion. Are the vocals in a different plane? Kind of if your head is here, do you hear vocals here and instruments here? And even better, are you hearing instruments around the back of your head, around the back of your ears? This wraparound stage is what I would call depth or immersion. Not all sets really reach around to the back of your ears. Some sets do. Some sets kind of stop right at your ear level, and you get this kind of a semicircle of stage around you. Some of them continue around the back. So why does all this matter? Why do people care about it? Typically, a bad stage reflects bad tuning or non-balanced tuning or tuning that could be improved. Stage can sometimes point you towards fixing the issue and improving the experience. And I think, and those of you who know Michael Bruce, he essentially tunes for stage. It's a very high priority on his list of getting tunings right. And essentially when you listen to what his sets sound like and the balance they achieve with the stage, you sort of figure out that there is a relationship between good tuning and what tuning sounds good to me, and having a stage that has all of these pieces done very, very well. So I don't want to put words into his mouth and say why it matters and how he achieves tuning. I think it would be an interesting video for him to do and to talk about that subject. But for me, I typically get sets out of the box and you say the stage is kind of in your head, and then you start looking at the frequency graph and you're like, this is off, there's not enough extension, too much pinna. All these things point to stage problems that I've just kind of been used to hearing now. And sometimes I go through and fix them. Sometimes I just go through and put it back in the box and be done with it. But at the end of the day, the goal of listening to IMs is really to sound like you are in the room with those players. And I do think stage is a really big part of that illusion of you've got to get it sounding close enough to what our ears are expecting to create this illusion to your brain is fooled enough to think that you are in the room. I think stage is a really big part of that and getting that and improving that experience. So what happens if you can't hear stage, and lots of people can't hear stage? Source, I'm just not a dongle fan on stage. I have yet to hear a dongle that really stages anywhere near a portable or a desktop. If you have a portable and a desktop and you hear stage, you can tend to listen to a dongle, and it's kind of there. You can get a similarity to stage, but then as soon as you go back to your desktop amp, you're like, oh, well, it's not quite there. But you hear the makings of decent stage on a dongle, but they never quite get there. And I don't really believe anyone who says that their dongle has as big of a stage as that portable or a desktop amp. It just doesn't happen. volume. Lower volume people, when you get into that extended treble at lower volumes, harder to get a projection out of your music. So that's why I tend to turn it up a little bit. Michael Bruce tends to turn it up a little bit. We tend to not be low volume listeners for that reason. Tips, your brain, I think there's 1,000 different factors on trying to create this illusion and to fool your brain into thinking that you are hearing sound from where it doesn't originate. So yeah, I think a lot of it is going through and listening to different tracks, listening to binaural recordings, and trying to get your brain used to hearing these different things from IEMs. So yeah, I do think your brain does play a big part of that, and tips is kind of a smaller part of it, but definitely think about these words and think about them as you are listening to your IEMs. You can't flip a switch and say, well, now I hear Soundstage. It doesn't work that way. And that's evidenced by everyone saying that everything has an average soundstage, and it really doesn't. It's pretty much a binary thing. It either projects or it doesn't. So that is what I got on Soundstage. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.